GOA in Texas are now seeking a nationwide injunction to stop the ATF's new pistol brace rule. So let's talk about this. But real quick, I want to thank the new sponsor of this channel, which is Lear Capital. Last year was a terrible year for most investors, and 2023 could be even worse with talk about a bad recession now coming maybe this year. The one thing that has always remained true over human history is the value of precious metals. There are a lot of gold companies out there for you to choose from, but Lear Capital has earned my business. If you're interested in investing in gold, I suggest you consider my friends over at Lear Capital. They're amazing people. I have had in-depth discussions with them prior to actually bring them onto this channel as a sponsor. And as a huge bonus to all of this, they actually support the Second Amendment, and they're supporting what we're doing here over on this channel. So if you're interested, head on over to Lear Capital by calling 1-800-920-8388 or go to learscholar.com to start buying and investing in gold now. As I mentioned in the intro, in this video, we will be discussing the ATF's new rule on stabilizing braces, which the ATF published on January 31st. This new rule makes it so that almost any pistol with a brace attached will now be considered an SBR and subject to the NFA's restrictions. In response to this final rule being published, multiple lawsuits have been filed against the ATF, and recently, Gun Owners of America, or GOA, and the state of Texas teamed up together to sue the ATF to try to get the pistol brace rule halted. And also right now, what they just filed was a motion for a preliminary injunction, which aims to halt the enforcement of the new pistol brace rule. These lawsuits are a direct challenge to that rule and the language change in that rule. In the GOA lawsuit, GOA as an org, along with the state of Texas, are seeking for the final rule to be found invalid under multiple theories. For example, they argue that it is a violation of the APA, it's a violation of separation of powers, it's an unconstitutional tax, and also that it violates due process. In the lawsuit, it's alleged that the final rule on pistol braces violated the Administrative Procedures Act, and that even if it didn't, it's a violation of the Second Amendment. First, in the APA section, GOA argues that the ATF did not follow the proper procedures for creating a new rule, since the final rule is so drastically different from what they proposed in their proposed rule. In the proposed rule, the entire brace analysis was centered around the worksheet 4999. However, in the final rule, the ATF completely scrapped that worksheet and came up with a new and even vaguer test, and essentially what that led to is a drastic change from the proposed rule to the final rule, and the argument is that that is actually a violation of the APA. Also importantly, in the APA section, you see the argument that Chevron deference should not be used to analyze this issue. Instead, at the very least, the rule of lenity should be used instead. Now, if you're not aware, Chevron deference refers to a Supreme Court case, and Chevron deference is a term coined after that case, and it has to do with the doctrine of judicial deference given to administrative actions like the ATF is doing here. Generally, for the agency to be given Chevron deference, the agency's interpretation of an ambiguous statute must be rational or reasonable. In contrast to Chevron deference, the rule of lenity indicates that when dealing with criminal statutory interpretation, a court is required to apply any unclear or ambiguous law in a way that is most favorable to us, the people, not an enforcement agency like the ATF. This type of argument has already been validated by the Fifth Circuit en banc panel in the bump stock case, which is Cargill v. ATF. Now, in this case, the state of Texas and GOA are pushing for the federal court for a nationwide injunction against the pistol brace rule. In the motion for preliminary injunction, Texas and GOA argue the NFA uses a three-part conjunctive test to define rifle. The weapon must be 1, designed or redesigned, 2, made or remade, and 3, intended to be fired from the shoulder. That means that it is not enough for that a weapon is constructed in a way that merely allows a shooter to fire from the shoulder. It must be designed and intended to be fired from the shoulder. They go on to state, in contrast, the final rule alters this three-part test to include a weapon that is equipped with an accessory, component, or other rearward attachment, e.g. a stabilizing brace, that provides surface area that allows a weapon to be fired from the shoulder. But a weapon with a brace that is designed and intended to be fired from the forearm is not designed and intended to be fired from the shoulder and is not a rifle. irrespective of whether it is capable of being fired from the shoulder. ATF recognized this reality in the Notice of Proposed Rulemaking, where it conceded that a weapon that could be fired from the shoulder may be designed and intended to be fired from the shoulder, or is likely designed and intended to be fired from the shoulder, is not a rifle. Rather, only a weapon that is designed and intended to be fired from the shoulder is a rifle. That comports with the statutory definition. Under the proposed rule, it would not have been enough that the weapon could be fired from the shoulder, or even that the weapon may be or is likely designed and intended to be fired from the shoulder. In contrast to the proposed rule, the final rule eliminates designed and intended from the definition. So here the plaintiffs are pointing out that for something to be a rifle under the statutory definition, it must be designed or made with the intent to be fired from the shoulder. The initial proposed rule identified that very fact and said just because something could be fired from the shoulder or may be fired from the shoulder didn't suddenly magically make it a rifle. The item had to be made with the intent to be fired from the shoulder. But that's one of the major issues with this rule, because pistol braces and stabilizing braces are not made with the intent to be fired from the shoulder. They are simply made to stabilize the firearm by either bracing it to your forearm or essentially attaching it to your firearm. Can they be used and fired from the shoulder? Yes, obviously, but they were not designed and intended to be actually shouldered and to be fired from your shoulder. So the proposed rule acknowledged that very fact, but then in the final rule, the ATF all of a sudden did a 180 and then simply said, if something may or could be fired from the shoulder, that is sufficient enough, and it's sufficient enough for the firearm to now fall under the NFA's restrictions of an SBR. Then later in the request for the injunction, they show how the final rule is not a logical outgrowth from the proposed rule that the ATF submitted, and it's not even what we all commented on. They created something completely different in the final rule. They state that this is a wholesale change in the methodology that a commenter on the proposed rule could not have foreseen, and is in no way a logical outgrowth thereof. In fact, the approaches in the final rule and the proposed rule yield conflicting results, which the final rule does not acknowledge, much less justify. So here GOA in Texas are pointing out that the final rule that the ATF is now enforcing is not what they initially presented in the proposed rule, and it's not what we all commented on and tried to fight against. Instead, the ATF completely scrapped the entire model that they presented in the proposed rule, and then in the final rule put forward a much vaguer standard. Ultimately, that led to a different conclusion and essentially made that if anything could or may be shouldered or may be fired from the shoulder, all of a sudden that magically makes it a SBR. So essentially almost every pistol with a brace attached to it would likely be an SBR. And it's for this reason that GOA in Texas are asking the court for a nationwide injunction against this new rule. They argue GOA and GOF have members and supporters nationwide. The geographic scope of interest presented, as well as the complications inherent to a piecemeal implementation or injunction of the final rule, which impact criminal prosecutions and fundamental rights, supports this court granting nationwide relief. So that is what is currently going on in the GOA in Texas lawsuit against the ATF and their new rule on pistol braces. GOA in Texas are pushing for this court to issue a nationwide injunction, and in this brief, they are making strong factual arguments on why the final rule is 100% invalid, and therefore the court here should issue a nationwide injunction. But of course, if anything else develops in this case, if we get any more information, I will let you all know. Also, if you like this video and you would like to support the channel, one of the best ways to do that is to like, comment, and subscribe. All those things help to fuel the algorithm, and it signals to YouTube that you guys see value in these videos and in this type of 2A news. As always, I want to thank everybody who likes, comments, subscribes, who hits the notification bell, who shares these videos. You guys are directly impacting these videos, impacting this channel, and helping me to reach and educate more people than I could ever do on my own. So as always, thank you all for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And never forget, this nation was built by armed scholars, and this nation will be maintained by armed scholars.